The South Texas Plains covers much of what is known as the Rio Grande Valley. Beginning just south of San Antonio, this ecoregion stretches from Del Rio near the Texas-Mexico border to the city of Rockport along the Gulf Coast. The southern part of the region encompasses several major urban centers with cities like McAllen, Harlingen, and Brownsville. Known as the Brush Country for its miles of dense, thorny scrub vegetation, historically the South Texas Plains was a mixture of brushlands, riparian forests, and grasslands. Hunters know the region for producing big deer and multitudes of quail. The area is also recognized by bird watchers as a major route for neotropical migrant birds on their journey through the Central Flyway. But like many areas of the state, South Texas has suffered from land fragmentation that has significantly altered wildlife habitats. Now considered the second fastest growing urban area in the United States, many are starting to question what is happening to all the wildlife species in this region.
The Rio Grande Valley has been converted to agriculture, and as a result, most of the native brush and forest along the Rio Grande River has been converted for crops. Of late, these croplands have become very valuable urban areas. We're losing our agriculture. We have lost our habitat along the river. We have similar problems on the edges of the Rio Grande Valley, wherever large acres of the brushlands have been converted to agriculture along the coast, as well as along the Rio Grande River all the way to San Antonio.
The Rio Grande Valley has long been known for its rich production of fruits and vegetables. But even with agriculture losing ground to the ever-expanding human population, invasive plant species also impact remaining wildlife habitats.
We still have the cattle operator that's trying to make a living, and they've been pushed to go to exotic grasses like buffalo grass. Well, buffalo grass is great for grazing, it's very poor for the wildlife community. As a result, it's not only invaded the pastures they planted it to, it's grown out into the brush.
Along with urbanization, you get invasive plants. And the Rio Grande Valley is having a tremendous problem with salt cedar, which is an invasive plant. And as a result of salt cedar, increased population, and increased irrigation, the Rio Grande River actually now some years doesn't make it to the Gulf of Mexico. Historically in South Texas, there were many sabal palm groves. And these old dead sabal palm leaves provided great roosting spots for local bats. Unfortunately, the palms that are left in the area, which aren't many, are now being trimmed for aesthetic reasons, which is eliminating the habitat for those bats.
Invasive plants and fragmentation can change wildlife habitats anywhere. But in South Texas, one small wildcat is finding the struggle to survive much tougher. The ocelot has been on the Federal Endangered Species list since 1972.
The ocelot, which is a very attractive spotted cat, used to range as far as Louisiana. Today, we only know of it in 3 small tracts, one at Laguna Atascosa National Wildlife Refuge and 2 private ranches. So we have a population of ocelots could be numbered into a few dozens that still exist in Texas. It's critically endangered. There are problems with isolation. These little populations are not connected, so you have a few animals that are maintaining their genetic diversity, and it's cratering because they are not exchanging DNA. So this species is hurting pretty bad.
That scar is going to be a very characteristic thing. We'll always be able to identify him.
The South Texas brushlands are not only valuable to ocelots and tropical birds, it's also very important to snakes and turtles. We have a Texas tortoise, which is unique to South Texas, and it's getting impacted by fragmentation. While a bird can fly across an open ag field, it's very hard for a tortoise to travel from block of brush to block of brush.
For the ocelot and Texas tortoise, their islands of isolation are getting smaller as the habitat becomes more fragmented.
Fragmentation divides the habitat and makes it difficult or maybe even impossible for wildlife to access necessary components of the habitat. Species like the ocelot require thick, dense, thorny scrublands, but actually over 90% of those scrublands have been lost to development or agriculture.
Texas Parks and Wildlife, along with other partners in conservation, are working with landowners to restore vital areas of the South Texas Plains ecoregion. But detrimental impacts still loom on the horizon.
Many conservation groups have pulled their efforts to put back piece by piece fragments of that forest that occurred along the Rio Grande. And we were developing a corridor that could be used by quite a bit of wildlife coming in from Mexico and also the southern limits of the range of the United States, using those tropical settings there for wildlife communities. Now we're getting a major step back with border security issues, and that's going to damage those wildlife communities that have been developed. Now we're talking about Trans-Texas corridors coming through South Texas in many directions, coming out of San Antonio, coming out of Victoria, going to Brownsville, going to McAllen, cutting across from Corpus Christi to Laredo. These are 1,200-foot wide corridors, and they're going to create gaps, barriers for wildlife movement. So we can have fragmentation in the form of these highway transportation corridors going through the brush country in the coming years.
Challenges will continue in the South Texas Plains ecoregion as development and populations expand. But we must find a way to grow sensibly so that wildlife can coexist with us for future generations.
The Texas Wildlife Action Plan tries to address conservation issues for all wildlife we have. Within the valley, we will still try to work with the landowners and the conservation groups to restore these riparian forests along the river. In areas where we have dense thorn scrub, which may be favorable for ocelot, we're going to try to connect these patches together with some form of brush corridors so the ocelots can travel between those without getting run over by a vehicle or getting killed by some form of predation.
Like the Gulf Coast, South Texas enjoys the economic benefits of nature tourism. There's tremendous economic growth, and it's essential for communities to work together for the benefit of wildlife and wildlife habitat.